Your coffee is dying. My precious beans! Right now, on your desk, in your hand, wherever you left it. The heat is bleeding out, molecules slowing down, energy dispersing into the room, into the air, into the vast indifferent nothing that surrounds all things. This is not a metaphor. This is thermodynamics, the second law. This is entropy, and entropy always wins. Every breath you take is a temporary arrangement of molecules that costs energy to maintain. Every heartbeat is your cells burning fuel to keep the pattern going just a little longer. Every thought firing across your synapses generates waste heat, accelerates the universe towards its final state of perfect equilibrium. You are not fighting entropy. You are entropy's favorite magic trick. The moment when matter organizes itself into something that notices it's organized. The moment before it all falls apart again. Drew M. Dalton talks about this, as does speculative realism. Unlike every consoling narrative that philosophy has offered you, from Plato's perfect forms to Camus' absurd heroism, Dalton's work strips away the safety nets. The universe is not indifferent to you because it has better things to do. The universe is indifferent because indifference is its fundamental operating principle. Everything dissipates, everything evens out, everything ends. Not eventually, constantly, right now. In the space between this sentence and the next, a trillion structures are collapsing into disorder. So here is the question. If entropy is not a problem to solve but the condition of all existence, what becomes of ethics? What becomes of meaning? What becomes of you sitting here still hoping your choices today will register tomorrow? Still believing your suffering deserves acknowledgement? Still caring despite every physical law telling you that caring is the most expensive thing you can do? This episode is not about finding hope. Hope is cheap. Hope is easy. Hope is what you reach for when you cannot face what entropy actually means. This episode is about something more challenging. Philosophers have spent millennia building meaning structures against the void, transcendent truths, eternal souls, universal justice. Every single one is a denial of matter, a refusal to accept that consciousness is neurons firing, that thoughts are chemical gradients, that when you die, the electricity stops and the warmth leaves and nothing remains but cooling meat returning to equilibrium. Dalton says, no more exceptions, no more special pleading. Consciousness is matter becoming aware of itself, briefly, before returning to the substrate. You are not outside the system. You are the system eating itself to stay warm. And yet we build ethics anyway. Not ethics grounded in cosmic purpose, not ethics justified by transcendent meaning. Ethics built on the only foundation left when you strip away those comforting lies. You are here temporarily. And while you are here, you can make the temporary worse or better for the other temporary things capable of noticing the difference. The universe will not validate this choice, but the person bleeding next to you will feel whether you stop the bleeding, and feeling is all there is. So let's stop pretending that your life matters to the cosmos. Let's start asking if it matters to the matter that can actually feel the difference. Your coffee is still cooling, you are still dying, and somehow, impossibly, you still give a shit about that. So let's find out what to do with it. 835. Philosophy is the history of running from bodies. Now bear with me on this. We'll start with Plato, with his cave. The idea that this world, this matter, this flesh is just shadow, and the real truth lives somewhere else, somewhere eternal, somewhere that does not decay. The physical world is a prison, he said. The body is a tomb. And if you think hard enough, if you reason purely enough, you can escape into the realm of perfect forms where nothing changes and nothing dies. This is not philosophy. This is the first great lie we told ourselves about what we are. Every system that came after repeated the same trick, different costumes, same denial. Descartes split you in half. mind and body, thinking thing and extended thing. And the thinking part, the conscious part, that was special. That was different. That was the part that might survive when the meat rots. Never mind that thoughts require neurons. Never mind that neurons require glucose and oxygen and electrochemical gradients. Never mind that when you cut off blood flow to the brain, consciousness does not float free. It stops immediately, completely, like turning off a light. Kant tried to rescue meaning without God, built the categorical imperative, universal moral law, treated ethics like geometry, like something you could prove independent of bodies, independent of desires and the messy material fact that you are an animal that needs to eat and fuck and sleep, or you stop existing. He wanted morality to be transcendent. He wanted it to be the same for all rational beings everywhere. He did not want to admit that rational beings are biological machines running on chemistry. Then God died and the existentialists threw a funeral. But even they couldn't let go. Sartre said existence precedes essence, said you are radically free, that consciousness is nothing, a pure negation, and you must create your own meaning through authentic choice. This sounds like facing the void. It sounds like honesty. But listen closer. Consciousness is still special. Freedom is still absolute. Your choices still matter in some fundamental way that transcends the material conditions that produced you. Camus pushed the rock up the hill and called it victory, called it rebellion, said you must imagine Sisyphus happy. But why? Because the struggle itself is meaningful, because consciousness choosing defiance is beautiful, because even in an absurd universe, the absurd hero matters. They were all still trying to make you matter more than matter. Now, what they avoided is that your brain weighs about 3 pounds. It's made of fat and protein and water, runs on about 20 watts. When glucose delivery stops, you lose consciousness in seconds. When oxygen stops, you get about 4 minutes before irreversible damage. When the electrical activity flatlines, you are gone. Not transcended, not liberated, gone. Every thought you ever had was a pattern of electrical activity across neural tissue. Every emotion was a cascade of neurotransmitters binding to receptors. Every moment of meaning was matter doing what matter does when it organizes into nervous systems. Complex, improbable, but matter all the way down. Philosophy kept building escape routes, kept insisting consciousness exists on a different plane, kept treating meaning like something that could float free from neurons firing and blood pumping, and entropy grinding everything down to equilibrium. Humanism was the last desperate attempt. After God died, after the eternal soul became untenable, humanism said, fine, we will build meaning here. Human flourishing, human dignity, human rights. We will make ourselves matter through reason, through ethics, through the progressive arc of history bending toward justice. We do not need heaven. We will create meaning on earth. And it worked for a while. It gave us human rights declarations and democracies and the idea that suffering should be minimized and consciousness should be respected. These are not small achievements, but they are built on the same denial. Because humanism still treats consciousness as special, still treats humans as exceptional, and still refuses to look at what we actually are. Animals, meat, highly organized meat that can think about being meat, but meat nonetheless, subject to the same physical laws as everything else, heading toward the same equilibrium as everything else. Your consciousness is not an exception to entropy. Your consciousness is entropy expressing itself through neural tissue before that tissue decays. Drew M. Dalton and the ideas of speculative realism stop running. They stop building escape routes. They stop pretending that matter can be transcended by thinking really hard about forms or freedom or flourishing. They say, look at what physics tells us. Energy disperses, complexity is temporary, organization costs more than it produces. The universe is not moving toward higher consciousness or greater meaning. The universe is moving toward heat death, maximum entropy, perfect equilibrium, the state where nothing can happen because there are no gradients left to drive any process. You are a gradient, a temporary pocket of low entropy in a universe slouching toward disorder. And maintaining that gradient costs energy you extract from your environment. Energy that ultimately comes from the sun, which is burning itself out and will eventually go cold. which will take everything with it into the long dark. Every act of meaning-making is biological. Every ethical stance is matter organizing itself into patterns that temporarily resist dissolution. When you die, those patterns dissolve, the proteins denature, the electrical signals cease. The warmth leaves your body as it equilibrates with the environment. There is no soul escaping, there is no consciousness continuing, there is only matter returning to the substrate from which it briefly organized. Philosophy kept trying to save you from this, kept building consolations, kept insisting that somewhere, somehow, you matter in a way that survives your material dissolution. But you do not. And here is where it gets interesting. You still care anyway. You still love people knowing they will die. You still fight for justice knowing history will forget. You still create beauty knowing it will decay, and you still suffer. And that suffering still demands acknowledgement even though the universe will never provide it. The consolations crumble not because they are insincere, but because they cannot survive contact with thermodynamics. You are not spirit trapped in matter. You are matter that learned to care about matter, briefly, improbably, and temporarily. The question is not how to transcend this condition. The question is what kind of ethics is possible when you finally stop pretending that you can. Let's talk about how long your name lasts. 3 generations, maybe 4 if you're lucky. Your great-great-grandchildren will not know your face. They will not know your voice. They might know a story distorted through retelling, stripped of context, reduced to a single characteristic that may or may not have been true. More likely, they will know nothing. You will be a name on a document they will never look at, a date, a connection in a genealogy tree that means nothing to them because they never felt your hand on their shoulder, never heard you laugh, never watched you cry over something that mattered desperately to you and means nothing to them. 4 generations, maybe 80 years after you die, then you are gone. That is the human scale. Now pull back. The pyramids are eroding, slowly yes, but the sand is winning. The Sphinx's face is already mostly gone. In 10,000 years, maybe less, these monuments to immortality will be hills, weird geological formations. The stone will still exist, but the meaning will be dust. No one will remember what they were for. No one will remember the names of the pharaohs, and no one will remember that humans once believed building big enough meant lasting forever. That is the civilizational scale. Pull back further. Your species is 200,000 years old. Maybe 300 depending on how you draw the line between you and what came before. Homo sapiens, wise man, the one who knows he knows. But the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Our entire species, every human who has ever lived, every thought ever thought, every city ever built, all of it happens in the last 0.004% of planetary history. We are recent. We are probably temporary. The fossil record is full of species that dominated and then disappeared. The dinosaurs had 165 million years and they never even had fucking iPhones. We've had 250,000. And we are already changing the atmospheric composition in ways that might make our own survival unlikely. That is the evolutionary scale. Keep pulling back. The sun is halfway through its life. In 5 billion years, it will expand into a red giant and swallow the earth. Everything you have ever known, everyone you have ever loved, every book ever written, every song ever sung, every monument ever built, all of it will be incinerated, turned to plasma, returned to the stellar medium. There will be no trace, no evidence you existed, no archaeological record because there will be no archaeologists, no planet to dig through. That is the stellar scale. And don't worry, we're not done. The universe is expanding, accelerating. Galaxies are moving away from each other. In trillions of years, in timescales so vast our brains cannot hold them, the last stars will burn out. The last black holes will evaporate through Hawking radiation, and what remains will be a thin soup of particles spreading through an infinite void, too far apart to ever interact, too cold for anything to happen ever again. Maximum entropy, heat death, the end not with a bang but with the ultimate whimper, silence, stillness, nothing. That is the cosmological scale. And against these scales, you are trying to make your life matter. You are trying to make your suffering mean something. You are trying to believe that your choice is registered, that your love counts, and that your pain deserves acknowledgement. This is the vertigo. This is what happens when you really sit with entropy as horizon, not as an intellectual concept, but as lived reality. The dizziness of recognizing that on every scale larger than your immediate experience, you are invisible, irrelevant, a fluctuation of statistical noise. The trap is that despair about cosmic insignificance is still using cosmic significance as the standard. You feel like your life should matter to the universe. You feel like your suffering should be recorded somewhere, validated somehow, and redeemed eventually. You feel like there should be justice on a large enough timescale, like meaning should transcend your particular moment, your particular body, your particular context. But why? Why should the universe care about you? The universe is not a parent, it is not a judge, it is not keeping score. The universe is physics, blind processes, energy dispersing according to probabilistic laws that have no awareness of your existence and no stake in your continuation. You have been judging your life against a lifetime of stars. You have been measuring your relationships against geological time. You have been asking if your suffering matters to the heat death. And of course it doesn't. Of course you come up empty. Of course you feel insignificant. You are using the wrong scale. Pain hurts now, not in a cosmically significant way, and not in a way that echoes through eternity. It hurts now in lived experience, in the immediate present of a body that can differentiate between states and prefers some over others. Love feels necessary now, not because it defeats entropy and not because it transcends matter. It feels necessary because you are wired to attach, to bond, to find other nervous systems and synchronize with them in ways that temporarily reduce the chaos of being alone in your own skull. Beauty stops you in your tracks now, not because it reveals eternal forms or because it connects you to the transcendent. It stops you because your pattern recognition systems are firing, because your brain is processing information in ways that generate the subjective experience of aesthetic arrest. These experiences do not need to matter cosmically to be real. They do not need to resist entropy to be worth attending to. This is not relativism. This is not saying nothing matters because everything is subjective. This is saying mattering happens at the scale where nervous systems interact, where bodies touch, where choices propagate effects through social systems, where suffering is actually experienced and care is actually possible. The universe does not need to validate your pain for your pain to demand response. You demand response. The person next to you demands response. The systems you are embedded in demand response because that is what consciousness does. It registers states, it differentiates, it prefers. And preference is the ground of ethics, not cosmic purpose. You are matter that matters to matter. That is not insignificant. That is the only significance available. But admitting this means giving up the last consolation, the idea that somewhere, somehow, on a large enough timescale, justice balances. Good triumphs. Suffering gets redeemed. The arc of the universe bends towards something other than equilibrium. It does not. There is no cosmic accounting. There is no final judgment. There is no rebalancing. The cruelty you experience will not be repaid. The kindness you offer will not be cosmically rewarded. The pain will not be retroactively justified by some larger purpose. It will just be pain. Experienced, unrecorded except in the nervous systems that felt it, mattering only to those systems, gone when those systems dissolve. And knowing this, you still have to decide what to do. You still have to choose whether to increase suffering or decrease it, whether to recognize other systems or exploit them, whether to care or not care. The universe will not tell you which choice matters more, but the person experiencing the effects of your choice will notice the difference. And noticing is all there is. Hope is a drug, and you are an addict. Give me some more of that delicious crack. You need to believe things will get better. You need to believe progress is possible. You need to believe the arc of history bends towards justice, that humanity is learning, that suffering decreases over time, and that your children will inherit something better than what you did. You need this the way you need oxygen, the way you need to believe the sun will rise tomorrow, even though you have no control over the mechanics. But here is a question that nobody wants to ask. What if hope is not a necessity? What if hope is a luxury? What if hope is a story you tell yourself so you do not have to look directly at what entropy means? Drew M. Dalton's framework does not allow for hope. Not the hope that you're used to. That's the hope that functions as promise, as expectation, as belief that the future redeems the present. Because entropy does not bend towards justice. Complexity does not trend towards consciousness. The universe is not getting any more orderly, it is getting less. And us, our planet, our galaxy, all of it is riding the dissipation curve towards equilibrium. Progress is local and temporary. Every advancement costs energy. Every increase in organization in one place requires greater disorganization somewhere else. You build cities by extracting resources. You power civilization by burning stored sunlight. You maintain your own complexity by consuming other complexity and excreting waste heat into an environment that absorbs it until it cannot absorb any more. There is no progressive arc. There is only temporary resistance followed by inevitable collapse. I sound like fucking Thanos in this episode. So what is hope in this context? The critics say this kind of thinking is dangerous. They say without hope, people do not organize, do not resist, do not fight. They say nihilism leads to passivity. The recognizing cosmic meaningless undermines the motivation for local meaning-making. That you need to believe change is possible or you will not work for change. But look at the evidence. Look at the most hopeful eras in recent history. The post-war optimism, the belief that technology would solve everything, the faith in democratic progress, the assumption that things naturally get better. And what did that hope produce? Complacency, comfort, the idea that history would do the work for you if you just waited long enough. Hope as expectation is an anesthetic. It numbs you to the present by promising a better future. It lets you tolerate intolerable conditions because tomorrow will be different. It functions as control. Keep hoping, keep believing, keep waiting for the change that is always coming but never quite arrives. Meanwhile, the people who have stared into the void and reported back are often more engaged, not less. Camus' absurd hero does not stop pushing the boulder. He just stops pretending the pushing will one day end. He affirms the struggle without needing the struggle to lead somewhere. The struggle is the point. The pushing is the meaning. Not because it achieves something, because it is the only thing you can actually do while you are here. Sisyphus does not hope the boulder will stay at the top. He knows it will roll down. He pushes it anyway. That is not hope. That is commitment. And maybe commitment is what you actually need. Hope says it will get better. Commitment says I will act as if my actions matter to the immediate conditions, regardless of whether they matter to the ultimate outcome. Hope requires belief. Commitment requires only recognition. Recognition that things could be worse. Recognition that your actions influence which direction things go. Recognition that suffering is real now and reducing it now does not require cosmic validation. You do not need to believe the universe cares about suffering to commit to reducing it locally. You do not need to believe consciousness is eternal to commit to treating conscious beings as worthy of consideration while they exist. You do not need to believe your life has cosmic significance to commit to living as if your choices matter to the people and systems they touch. Because they do. Not eternally, not transcendentally, but actually, in material ways, an immeasurable effect. You give someone water and their thirst is quenched. This does not need to echo through eternity to be real. The quenching happened. The nervous system registered relief. The suffering decreased. Locally, temporarily, enough. Hope keeps asking, will it get better? Will the future justify the present? Will history remember? Will the suffering be redeemed? These questions require knowledge that we do not have. They require cosmic perspective that we cannot access. These questions keep us oriented toward a future that may not come while people suffer in the present that is actually here. Commitment asks different questions. What am I doing right now? What effects are my actions having on the systems around me? Am I increasing suffering or decreasing it? Am I recognizing the other systems in my proximity, or am I treating them as obstacles to my own continuation? These questions are answerable. They do not require hope. They require attention, presence, the willingness to see what is actually happening rather than what you wish was happening. And here is the uncomfortable possibility. Maybe hope has always been a way of not facing the real question. Maybe the real question is not whether the future will be better. Maybe it's whether you can justify the present to the people living through it. Can you justify their suffering by pointing to some eventual payoff? Can you tell them to wait, to hope, to believe things will improve while they are hungry now, in pain now, dying now? Or do you have to admit that now is all there is? That if their suffering is going to be addressed, it has to be addressed now by the people who are here now with the resources available now. Entropy makes this urgent, because if there is no cosmic rescue, no historical redemption, no metaphysical safety net, then what happens here matters more, not less, because it is all there is. The moment matters because the moment is the only place where mattering happens, where choice has effect, where care is possible or absent. Hope wants to move you out of the moment, wants to console you with futures and purposes and fucking Gantt charts. It wants to make the present bearable by promising it is temporary, that something better is coming and that suffering is not for nothing. But what if the suffering is for nothing? What if there is no redemption coming? What if this moment is not a step towards something better, but simply this moment, containing its own suffering and demanding its own response? Then you cannot defer ethics to the future. You cannot wait for conditions to improve, and you cannot hope your way out of responsibility. You have to act with what you have, knowing it will not be enough, and knowing that entropy will eventually erase it. Even knowing that the people you help will die anyway, and the systems you build will collapse, and nothing you do will change the ultimate trajectory toward heat death. You act anyway, not because you hope it will matter cosmically, because it matters now to the matter capable of registering that it matters. That is not hope. That is something harder, more honest. That is commitment without consolation, action without expectation. Ethics built on the recognition that now is not preparation for later. Now is all you fucking get. And if now is all you get, then the question is not what you hope for. The question is what are you doing right now while people are suffering, while you still have the energy to act, while your particular organization of matter can still choose to reduce the chaos or add to it. Hope is the luxury of those who can afford to wait. Commitment is what you do when waiting is no longer an option. And entropy does not wait. So why should you? There is a line, and entropy cannot erase it. On one side, the universe has no inherent meaning, no teleology, no purpose, no plan. The stars do not care about you. The laws of physics do not bend toward consciousness. Matter does what matter does, and what matter does is disperse, equalise, and dissolve. This is meaningless. This is the void. On the other side, pain fucking hurts. Right now, in your body, in nerve endings firing signals that your brain interprets as damage, as threat, as something wrong that needs attention. This is not philosophical, and it is not abstract. This is suffering. And suffering has content, it has location, it has intensity. It demands response, not because the universe says so, but because the nervous system experience it cannot not respond. These are not the same thing. Meaninglessness is a fact about the cosmos. Suffering is a fact about experience. And confusing them is the mistake that has paralyzed ethics for centuries. Philosophy kept trying to ground ethics in meaning, kept insisting that right and wrong need cosmic foundations, that you cannot have morality without God, or natural law, or universal reason, or some transcendent structure that makes ethics true independent of who is suffering and who is watching. But watch what happens when you strip that away. When you admit the universe is indifferent. when you accept that there is no cosmic ledger, no final judgment, no metaphysical court where suffering gets tallied and justice gets served? Does pain stop? Does hunger stop? Does the scream of someone being tortured stop being a fucking scream? No. The suffering continues, independent of meaning, independent of cosmic significance, and independent of whether anyone is keeping score. A migraine does not need the universe to validate it. It hurts. The hurt is the fact. The hurt is local, embodied, and immediate. And the person experiencing the migraine will very much like it to stop, regardless of whether stopping it matters to the heat death of the universe. This is where entropy-aware ethics begins. Not with transcendent truths or universal laws, with the recognition that mattering is local, embodied, and finite. And that is enough. You do not need a metaphysical foundation to differentiate between states that perpetuate organized complexity and states that dissolve it. You need a nervous system. You need the capacity to register damage. You need the evolved machinery that makes some states feel bad and some states feel less bad. That is not relativism. It is biology. This is matter that has learned to monitor its own integrity and respond to threats to that integrity. Pain is the experience of systems breaking down. Suffering is the experience of that breakdown being prolonged, intensified, and made unbearable. And you, with your nervous system, your capacity to model other nervous systems, and your mirror neurons and your theory of mind and your whole evolutionary inheritance of social cognition, you can recognize similar systems in others. You can see when they are breaking down. You can extrapolate from your own experience of suffering to their experience of suffering. We call that empathy. You don't need God to tell you that torture is wrong. You need to have been in pain once and to recognize that same pain in another body, and to know immediately, viscerally, that increasing that pain is a choice, and that the person experiencing it would prefer you did not make that choice. This is ethics. Not ethics handed down from heaven or derived from pure reason. Ethics that emerges from the material fact of embodied consciousness capable of suffering and capable of recognizing suffering in others. And what makes this so radically different from historical ethics is it does not rescue meaning from entropy. It locates ethics squarely within entropy. Because suffering is entropic. Trauma is disorganization. Pain is the experience of systems losing coherence. When you are injured, your body is literally coming apart at the site of injury. Cells rupturing, structures breaking, order collapsing into disorder. And your nervous system registers this as suffering because suffering is the alarm system that tells you something that should be organized is becoming disorganized, and if this continues, you will cease to exist. Healing is the temporary reversal of that entropy. Care is the energy you spend helping another system resist disorganization. Kindness is recognizing that other organized systems are as improbably complex as you are and as threatened by dissolution and as deserving of whatever brief resistance to entropy is possible before entropy wins. You are dying. Everyone you love is dying. Every system you build will collapse. Entropy will win. This is not pessimism, this is fact. And it still matters whether the collapse is cruel or kind. It still matters whether the dying is accompanied by care or neglect, whether someone holds your hand or walks away, whether the pain is managed or ignored, whether the people around you treat your disintegration as something that deserves gentleness or something that deserves indifference. This is not romanticism. This is not saying love conquers entropy or meaning emerges from authentic choice. This is saying, in the brief window between organization and dissolution, between birth and heat death, some states involve more suffering than others, and you can choose which direction to nudge things. Not because your nudge changes the ultimate outcome, but because your nudge is the only scale on which change is possible. The universe is indifferent. You are not. And your non-indifference is not a flaw in your understanding of entropy. It is entropy's temporary reversal, the improbable eddy in the stream where matter cares about other matter. That caring is not eternal. It is fragile. It is contingent. It evolved because organisms that cared about damage to themselves survived better than organisms that did not. And organisms that could extend that caring to offspring, to mates, to coalition partners survived better still. And now you have this whole apparatus of empathy and compassion and moral reasoning that is just your brain modeling damage to other systems and responding as if that damage matters. Which it does. Not cosmically, locally, in the immediate material interactions between systems capable of suffering. You are one of those systems. The person next to you is one of those systems. And the ethical question is not, does this matter eternally? The question is, does this increase or decrease suffering in the systems capable of experiencing it? And you can answer that question. Not perfectly and not with certainty, but you can look at the effects of your actions. You can track whether you are helping systems maintain organization or accelerating their dissolution. You can choose to allocate your limited energy toward harm reduction or harm multiplication. This is ethics without metaphysical foundation. Ethics built from the body up, from pain up, from the immediate recognition that suffering is real and that you have some small influence over how much suffering exists in your local environment while you are here. The universe will never tell you this matters. The universe will never reward you for choosing care over cruelty. The universe will continue its inexorable slide toward equilibrium whether you torture someone or feed them. But the person you torture will experience the torture. The person you feed will experience relief from hunger. These experiences are material facts. They happen in nervous tissue. They propagate effects through memory, through trauma, through the systems that connect embodied beings. And those effects are the only effects that register on the scale where you actually live. So stop waiting for cosmic permission to care. Stop looking for metaphysical justification for ethics and stop asking if suffering matters to the void. The void does not suffer. You do. And the recognition of your own suffering gives you the only ethical foundation you need. The certainty that suffering is real, the capacity to recognize it in others, and the choice about whether to increase it or reduce it while you are here. The choice is not meaningless because it is temporary. That choice is meaningful because it is the only place where meaning can actually occur, in matter, in the brief moment when complexity cares about complexity. You are that moment. Your ethics are that moment. And the fact that the moment ends does not make it futile. It makes it urgent. You cannot be certain of anything except what hurts. Not certain the universe has purpose, not certain it does not. Not certain consciousness survives death, not certain it does not. Not certain your life means something cosmically, not certain it is just noise in the data. You cannot know. You will never know. Certainty about cosmic questions is category error, metaphysical overreach, the mistake of thinking your local perspective gives you access to ultimate truth. But you can be certain that pain hurts, that hunger demands food, that loneliness aches in ways that connection temporarily relieves. These are not philosophical propositions. These are facts of embodied existence, immediate and undeniable. The raw data of being alive in matter that can register states and prefer some over others. So we build ethics from this, from the ground up, from the immediate up. We stop trying to find foundations in the cosmos and start noticing what actually constrains ethical behavior. You do not steal from your neighbor because of Kant's categorical imperative. You do not steal because you recognize their vulnerability mirrors yours, because you know what it feels like to lose something you need. Because empathy is not a philosophical achievement but a neural reality. Mirror neurons firing, theory of mind activating, your brain modeling their distress and responding as if that distress is information worth processing. This is not beautiful, this is not noble. This is evolution building cooperation mechanisms into social animals, because social animals that cooperate survive better than social animals that defect. You care about your neighbor not because the universe demands it, but because you are wired to care by millions of years of selection pressure favoring organisms that could coordinate behavior. Ethics is not discovered in transcendent truths. Ethics is negotiated in material conditions by material beings with evolved capacities for suffering and cooperation. And entropy does not undermine this. Entropy clarifies it. Because if everything is temporary, if all organisation eventually dissolves, if heat death is the ultimate horizon, then the question becomes, what kind of temporary do you want to participate in? You are going to die. The people around you are going to die. The systems you build are going to collapse. The institutions you trust are going to fail. The species you belong to is going to go extinct. The planet you live on is going to be incinerated, and the universe itself is going to reach maximum entropy and stop. None of this is preventable. None of this is negotiable. This is the condition. So what do you do in the meantime? You can participate in cruel temporary or kind temporary, exploitative temporary or reciprocal temporary, indifferent temporary or engaged temporary. The ethics of entropy is not about transcending the temporary. It's about choosing what the temporary looks like while it's happening. And this is acceptance without surrender. Accepting that the universe does not care does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop expecting the universe to validate your caring. You care anyway, not because it's cosmically significant, because it's locally necessary. Look at what this requires. It requires you to commit to harm reduction without requiring the belief in ultimate justice. It requires you to build systems of care knowing they will eventually collapse. It requires you to love people who will die and to fight for causes that might fail. It requires you to create beauty that will be forgotten. Not because these things transcend entropy, but because these things are what you do while entropy happens. You heat the water knowing it will cool. You organize knowing it will disorder. You care knowing the caring will end. This is not futility. This is the only stance that does not lie to you about what you are. You are matter temporarily resisting equilibrium, and the resistance is not permanent, but it is real. The effects propagate, the care registers. The suffering stays reduced for the duration that it stays reduced, and duration is all you have. This is the ethics of acceptance without surrender. You accept the universe's indifference. You accept entropy's inevitability. You accept that nothing you build will last and no one will remember, and the cosmic scales make you invisible. And you act anyway. Not because you believe it will matter eternally, because it matters now. Critics call this nihilism. They say if nothing matters cosmically, then nothing matters at all. They say without transcendent meaning, there is no reason to care, no reason to act, no reason to choose care over cruelty. But I say they're wrong. They're confusing cosmic mattering with local mattering. They're still using the wrong scale. Nihilism says nothing matters because everything is meaningless. Dalton's framework says everything is meaningless cosmically and mattering happens anyway, locally, urgently, in the interactions between complex systems that temporarily resist equilibrium. You are that temporary resistance. Your ethics are that temporary resistance. And the fact that resistance is temporary does not make it futile. It makes it the only thing you can actually do. You cannot stop entropy. You cannot prevent heat death. You cannot make your consciousness permanent or your achievements eternal. You cannot build meaning that survives the dissolution of matter. But you can choose what happens in the systems you touch while you are here. You can choose to reduce suffering or increase it. You can choose to recognize other organized complexity or exploit it. You can choose to care or not care. And these choices propagate effects, real effects, measurable outcomes. A child fed is not cosmically different from a child starving, but that child experiences the difference. A wound treated is not eternally significant, but the person with the wound registers the care. A system organized with reciprocity rather than exploitation does not transcend entropy, but it creates different conditions for the temporary beings existing within it. This is ethics built on radical doubt. Doubt about cosmic meaning, doubt about transcendent purpose, doubt about whether any of this echoes beyond the immediate material interactions where it occurs. But certainty about immediate experience, certainty about suffering, certainty about your capacity to influence whether suffering increases or decreases in your local environment. You build from this, from the body, from pain, from the recognition that you cannot know ultimate truths, but you can know proximate realities. That you cannot justify ethics cosmically, but you can practice ethics locally. And local is not less real than cosmic. The glass of coffee cooling on the desk, this is entropy winning. This is the gradient equalizing, the temporary organization returning to equilibrium. But someone drank from that glass. The warmth was on their hands, the bitterness on their tongue. The caffeine entered their bloodstream and changed neural firing patterns for hours. The entropy was always going to win, but the drinking happened anyway. You are not the coffee, you are not the glass, you are the drinking. You are the moment when organization experiences itself, when complexity recognizes complexity, when matter matters to matter. And when you are gone, when your particular organization dissolves back into substrate, what will remain is not your permanence. Nothing remains. But the effects you had on other organizations while you existed, those effects happened. They registered. They changed conditions. Did you make the dissolution gentler? Did you ease suffering while it was happening? Did you care for the other improbable eddies swirling briefly near you? These are not cosmic questions. They are material ones, and they have material answers. You either did or you did not. The person experiencing your care or your cruelty knows which. And their knowing is all the validation ethics ever needed or will ever get. Entropy teaches what philosophy keeps forgetting. We are not exceptions to the physical world. We are expressions of it. And our ethics do not transcend matter. They emerge from it. They operate within it. They affect it. So stop asking if your life means something to the universe. Ask if it meant something to the person whose suffering you eased. Ask if it meant something to the system you helped organize. Ask if it meant something to you while you were living it. And if the answer is yes, even briefly, even imperfectly, even knowing it was temporary, then that was enough. That was always enough. The universe will not tell you this, but the matter that experienced your mattering already knows, and matter is all there is. So make it matter, now, while you can. You're still here. You listen to all of this and you're still here, you brave fuckers. Entropy is still happening. You are still dying. The universe is still indifferent, and you still care. That is not a problem to solve. That is the condition you work from. Philosophy spent millennia trying to rescue meaning from matter, trying to make ethics transcendent, trying to ground value in something eternal. Plato's forms, Kant's imperative, Sartre's freedom, Camus' rebellion. Every system another escape route. Another way to pretend that consciousness exists outside the material. Another denial that you are meat that thinks about being meat before the meat stops thinking. And it failed. Not because philosophers weren't smart enough, but because the project itself was misconceived. Meaning does not need rescue. It needs recognition. It is already here, in the material interactions between systems that care because they are built to care. In bodies seeking connection, in the brief window where complexity resists equilibrium before equilibrium wins. Entropy does not threaten this. Entropy contextualizes it. Your caring is temporary, localized, contingent. It evolved. It costs energy. It will end when you end. And it is real. Both things are true simultaneously. The productive uncertainty is this. You cannot know if your life has cosmic significance. You cannot know if consciousness survives death. You cannot know if the universe has purpose. You will never know. Certainty about ultimate questions is not available to local systems. But you can know that right now, in this moment, you have capacity. The capacity to increase suffering or decrease it. The capacity to recognize other organized complexity or exploit it. The capacity to care or not care. Your choices propagate effects through the networks you are embedded in. Real effects. A word changes a mood changes a decision. A decision changes conditions for others. The effects cascade. Not eternally, not cosmically, but actually, in matter, in systems, in the only place where effects can register. So the ethical stance that emerges from entropy-aware philosophy is not despair and not hope. It is lucid commitment, engaged acceptance. The refusal to pretend your struggles matter cosmically combined with the insistence that they matter locally. You build systems knowing they will collapse. You fight injustice knowing entropy will erase all evidence of the fight. You do it anyway. Not because doing it changes the ultimate outcome, but because not doing it changes the immediate conditions. And immediate conditions are the only scale where change is possible. Maybe the tragedy is not that the universe doesn't care. Maybe the tragedy is that you keep expecting it to. That you keep asking the wrong entity for validation. The universe will never tell you that you matter. but the person next to you might. The system you contribute to might organise differently because of your input. The suffering you alleviate might be the only significance that was ever available. And if that's true, if local mattering is all there is, then the question is not how do I cope with meaninglessness. The question is what am I doing right now with the mattering I have access to? You are entropy's temporary reversal. You are matter that cares about matter. You are the improbable eddy in the stream toward equilibrium. You will not last. Nothing does. But while you are here, you choose what kind of dissolution you participate in. Cruel or kind, exploitative or reciprocal, indifferent or engaged. The universe will not remember your choice. But the people living through the effects of your choice will experience them. And experience is all there is. Thank you, you beautiful lot, for being with me today. If this episode left a mark, if it made you think differently about who you are, how you've been performing, and the nature of self, then I'd love to hear from you. You can drop a message or a comment on our social media. So we have the website, which is theobservingeye.com. That's on Substack, and you can find other essays and articles on there alongside the podcast. We are on TikTok, Instagram, and X, all with the handle @theobservingeye. And we're also on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@theobservingeye as well. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of the usual villains that you can find us podcasts on. We are there. There's also a book which you can buy, or you can read. You don't have to buy it, you can read it. The book is available for free for everyone on the observingeye.com website, or you can buy it on Amazon if you want a printed copy. I think it's like £5 or something, £6. But you don't have to. Go and read it. Go and read it for free, because I'm all about, as you may well know if you've been here for a while, I'm all about sharing the knowledge. So go and grab a copy of it if it's interesting. If you're interested, I should say. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.